Coming up on Unwritten. What do you tell people like that come to you and say like I just can't meditate, like I can't sit still? What do you tell those people?
Through the years, that's the most common thing I've heard.
Yeah.
And, the first thing is that everybody can meditate. The
Hmm.
most important thing is, why do you want to do it? And find a practice that is fun for you.
Well, Jeff, can you please tell me who you are and what has led you on this path to doing what you do today?
Yeah, so I've been involved in the meditative and martial arts now for about 36 years. And I got introduced to the meditative arts in a bit of a roundabout way. I used to be into Western boxing as a young guy, and I loved the thrill of the sport and the challenge and just everything about it. It was a lot of fun. It was something that I did 5 6 days a week. I used to go to a boxing gym that was just a few blocks down the street here from my academy, and there was a coach there who was a very well-known coach and had actually created national and world champion level boxers. And I really wanted to get to spend some time with him. And in a boxing gym, if you're not familiar with how they run, they're a little different than your traditional style fitness class, in that it's not one coach teaching a group of 20 or 30 people in a class environment. It's usually 4 or 5 different coaches in the gym, and they each have, a handful of fighters that they work with. So I
Hmm.
would always show up at the gym when I knew he was going to be there and try to get him to recognize me and work very hard. And finally, after following him around for about 3 or 4 months, he started helping me out and giving me some tips and working with me on my skill set. And it only took maybe 2 or 3 weeks of working with him, and he said something to me that changed my life forever. In that, he said, if you really want to be a good boxer, you should start doing meditation and Tai Chi. Now, at the time,
Hmm.
I was this young kid. I didn't know much about anything and thinking, isn't Tai Chi for like old people in the park? How's that going to help me be a better boxer?
Yeah.
And I had a lot of respect for him. Everything he gave me, I treated like it was gold. And I started doing that practice, and it's changed my life in so many ways. And through the years, I've had thousands of students come through the academy, and I've heard hundreds of stories of how the meditative arts has positively influenced people's lives. And that's kind of what's made me so passionate about the idea, and been the motivation for my last couple books, and why I created my online program, The Yielding Warrior, and why I'm just doing everything I can to get the message out there.
And so far, how long has that been now since then?
Uh, I met him back in, it was either 89 or 90. So it was a long time
Oh,
ago.
wow.
Yeah.
So now, have you been meditating all these years?
Yeah. I've been practicing the meditative arts for 34, 35 years.
I like how you call it meditative arts. Like it's like it's an art form to you.
Oh, it fully is, and I've been studying my pretty much the majority of my life. And it's my, not only is it something I love to do, it's also my profession. And so I'm around
Mm-hmm.
this stuff all day, every day. And I'm still just a student. I'm learning all the time. It's definitely a science and a very deep practice. And so, when I say meditative arts, I'm encompassing everything from movement practices, from sitting practices,
Mm.
standing meditation, breath work, walking meditations. I mean, there's really a lot of different
Oh,
things that
yeah.
are included in that.
So now that you've been doing it for 30 years, how has meditation just, I guess, what role has meditation now played in your life?
Well, it's done many things for me personally in that, I pretty much live the practice. Every morning I have a ritual practice that I do is just kind of part of who I am, like you're brushing your teeth. And I do active practices every day. It's made me be able to hand down these arts to thousands of people. And that's one of the things that really kind of drives me and gives me a lot of pleasure in the arts is that not only do I personally resonate with them, but I'm able to help positively influence people's lives by teaching them these practices.
Mm,
With the meditative practices, I kind of break them down into three training categories. We have ritual practices, active practices, and philosophical practices. And as you're building a life practice around meditation, you want to incorporate ritual practices, which are when you set time aside every day and you do a little bit of a practice. Now, you can get a lot of benefits from meditation in a fairly short amount of time. You don't need to retire to a cave and meditate for the rest of your life in order to get the benefits from meditation. But if you just did 20 minutes a day of a ritual practice, you could see a lot of payout from that. The key is you need to do a little bit every day. Something
mm,
where you want it to be part of your day and part of your life. And so, the Dalai Lama once said that everybody should meditate for 20 minutes a day. Unless you're too busy, then you should meditate for an hour. And I love
oh
that
yeah, yeah, I heard that.
in that it's so important to spend a little bit of time just connecting with yourself and being present. And you know what? A lot of times I think people get a little bit distracted and think that when they start taking on a meditative practice, that they'll watch this video or they'll listen to this audio or they'll
Mm,
something that helps them with the practice. And while I think that these are great tools to help somebody learn a practice, remember, for those of you that are new out there learning the meditative arts, is that when you do your ritual practice, they're called oftentimes internal arts for a reason. And they're meant to
mm,
be looking inside, inward. And if you're listening to an audio or you're watching a video when you're doing your practice, you're kind of missing the boat a little bit. So use those things to help you learn the skills. But when you do your practice every day, shut off your phone, shut off the audio, and just use that to turn inward. So that would be a
mm,
ritual practice. Then we have active practices. And active practices are things that we can do when you're standing in line at the grocery store or walking down the street or even sitting in your
mm,
car at a red light. And they're things where we want to incorporate these as much as we can in every day. So the meditative arts start to become more of a way of life and kind of how we live. And these things could be as simple as doing some spinal rotations or maybe counting out 10 breaths just to bring you back present into what you're doing. They only take 60 seconds, maybe 2 or 3 minutes. And if you just do these check ins periodically throughout the day, they really help deepen your ritual and help you to stay
mm.
more in tune throughout the day. And then the third area would be philosophical practices. And those could be either ritual based practices or active practices. And if you use all three of these as you're starting to build a practice around the meditative arts, you can really get a lot of benefit out of the practice.
So, what does your daily meditation routine look like?
Every morning, I usually go for about anywhere from 60 to 90 minutes at a minimum. And then throughout the day, I'll periodically go through a Tai Chi form or maybe do a sitting practice in the afternoon or do some standing meditation. And then I'm doing active practices all day, every day, as well as the philosophical practices. So it's pretty much something that I try to integrate into almost everything I do.
So, what are you doing for this like hour?
A variety of things: breath work, sitting meditation, movement meditation, stretching exercises, different things to just stay present and to have that morning kind of start off in a place where I'm not thinking about my phone. When I get out of bed, the first thing most people do is they turn on their phone and they start looking at texts and emails.
Scrolling, yeah.
Exactly, as much as you can get away from that and just be present and reconnect with who you are. One of the things about meditation is that in today's society, everybody is so busy. We're distracted
Mm,
by this advertisement, and we go to work and we're having to kind of watch what we say. Maybe we don't want to hurt somebody's feelings, or we don't want to take something the wrong way. So a lot of times we're walking through our lives with these kind of walls up to protect us. Or, as one of my old meditation teachers, he always used to say, we walk around with these masks on. And I
mm,
really like this idea because oftentimes we are wearing a mask. And if get so used to wearing these masks in everything we do, sometimes we get so connected to this, we go to look at ourselves in the mirror and we're still wearing that mask. And the meditative
mm.
arts are one of those things that kind of help us let go of that mask and really stay truly connected to who we are.
And so what does the philosophical one look like? Because when I hear philosophical, I hear like, what do you believe in? What is like, what's your purpose? What's your faith? Like, is it related to that or what?
Not exactly. So, when I refer to the philosophical side of the training, it could be anything from a sound or a vibration to resonate different energy in the body and to have a different meaning behind it. For example, when I say the sound Om, I
Hmm.
think of changes, strength, and beauty of true nature we all possess. The Buddha's body brings peace, bliss, clarity, firmness, courage, stability, and strength. And so I have this meaning behind the sound. So when I'm doing this in my mind, I have this mindset that I'm looking for. And it could be something as simple as a gratitude meditation. It could be something as far as different sayings that we memorize. So one of my old meditation teachers, he always used to have me memorize these sayings on virtue and mindset and kind of the way of life, and so that led me to the Tao Te Ching. Are you
Yeah.
familiar with the Tao Te Ching?
Uh, I heard of it.
Okay, it's worth checking out. It's a pretty amazing book, and it was written 2,400 years ago, um, and it's basically 81 sayings that talk about the way and the virtue and the way to kind of live a virtuous lifestyle. And
Oh yeah,
in
I've heard Wayne Dyer. Uh, do you know Wayne Dyer?
Yeah,
I've heard him speak about that a lot.
yeah. So in part of my training, I memorized the 81 sayings of the Tao Te Ching, and
Oh
I
wow.
used to say those in my head every day for about 12 years straight. And that could be one of, when I say philosophical, one of the ideas behind that. And so there's many different directions we can take that philosophical practice, but that gives you some idea what I mean with that.
And for you specifically, why do you think you've been so drawn to meditation and just like engulfing your whole life around meditation, and from your daily practices to you now what you make a living off of, like that's how you survive through like your meditations teachings and courses and helping people out, like what is the overall purpose of meditation in your life and how you help people?
Well, It's helped me find myself.
Mm.
When I was a young guy, I was kind of lost and searching and not really sure what my purpose was. The meditative arts has given me a calling and something to inspire me every day, something to get me up and get me motivated. A kind of a funny story, when I first started doing the meditative arts, I told you that boxing coach kind of turned me on to it. And he started me on a Tai Chi form, and he told me he wanted me doing this for an hour a day. And because I was always trying to impress him and do the best I could around him, I was doing an hour and a half every day.
Uh,
And in the first couple weeks, he showed me the first three movements of this Tai Chi form. Well, this is something that really you could show somebody in one session. But he had me doing this for, at least an hour a day. I was doing more, but at least an hour a day. And I did this every day religiously, these three movements that you could learn in one session. So I'm doing this every day, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months goes by, and he hasn't showed me anything else when coming to Tai Chi. And I
mm,
started getting very frustrated. I'm thinking, man, is this guy ever going to show me anything? What am I doing this for? And, I'd still go to the boxing gym 5, 6 days a week. And he'd ask me how my meditation was going. And so the last thing I would ever do was miss a day, because I wouldn't want to have to tell him that I didn't do it. And
mm,
so I was doing it every day. Uh, and I'm sure he could tell that I was frustrated. Well, at about the 7 or 8 month mark, I went down in my basement to do my practice one morning, and I looked up at the clock, and an hour and a half had already gone by, and it felt like 15 minutes. And at that point,
mm.
I didn't know what happened. I didn't know where my mind went, or the energy that I felt was very euphoric. It was really an amazing sensation. And at that point on, I was hooked. It was like I was in it for the long haul from there. And that's when I kind of started changing my focus. I've always been into the martial arts, and I still am today, but it's kind of when my main focus kind of shifted more towards the meditative arts and
Mm.
less towards the martial side of the practice. And from that point on, my whole life has been down that path.
What do you think it was during that time? Because I've had moments of like flow state like that before as well, where like I don't know, whether it be like editing a video for the podcast or even some podcast sessions where you'll just be in the flow of conversation and like an hour will have passed. What do you think it was for you, um, where an hour had passed and it felt like 10 minutes?
When you're doing meditation, and one thing is just being fully present. If you could be fully present in anything, you can get to that point where time will pass quickly. But when you have, like, the experience that I had was not just having time pass, but it was the euphoric sensation that came through doing thousands and thousands of repetitions of this movement and learning how to move that energy through the body and building up that positive momentum that almost is like a buzz going through the body. You're like, kind of almost vibrating a little bit. And the meditative arts, through repetition, helps us stay connected to this source of energy that we all have in the body. The idea of learning how to use the energy in the body, part of one of the five regulations, with any of the meditative arts, we use what we call the five regulations. We have regulating the body, regulating the breath, regulating the mind, regulating the
Mm,
energy, and regulating the spirit.
mm,
Regulating the body is the easiest one to understand and cultivate. And an example of that would be, think about a time when you're sitting down at your computer maybe your shoulders are hunched forward and you've been sitting
Mhm.
there for 3 or 4 hours and your neck starts getting sore and you start feeling energetically depleted. And then think of another time where the most important person in your world walks in the room and your body perks up and your energy is strong and your whole state changes. Well, this is something that we can control all day, every day. And so, with the
Mhm.
meditative arts, one of the first things that we do is learn how to regulate the body, not only in our meditation practice, but in our day to day lives and in everything we do. Then we have regulating the breath. And regulating the breath is a lifelong practice. It's,
Yeah.
Qigong is often referred to as the science of the breath. And there's literally hundreds of different breathing strategies. Because of this, we broadly categorize them into the yin methods and yang methods. Yin methods
Mhm.
are often deeper, more holistic style of meditations that help bring our energy inward. And an example of a yin breath would be if you ever listen to somebody sleep, their natural breathing pattern is a longer inhale and a shorter exhale. And this is the body's
Mhm.
natural way of bringing your conscious mind into your subconscious mind, which is where we are when we're sleeping and dreaming. So, if we want to emulate this style of breath, we can do longer inhales, maybe soft retentions at the end of the inhale when we're doing our meditation practice to help bring this energy inward. And this is great for stress reduction, working with anxiety, trying to get to deeper levels of focus. There's many applications of this. Then we
Wh-
have
What
the
about what about like when you're just in the heat of the moment and you just feel so stressed out and you feel like, I don't know, emotionally triggered and frustrated, or you have a boil of emotions? What do you do then?
Well, two things. One is we can use this side of the breath to help bring those emotions down. But two, because of if you are doing a meditative practice and you're consistently doing this every day, you're going to recognize those imbalances and those emotional states before they get too far off center, right? And so
Mm.
by doing your practice, when you can first notice that imbalance, it's easier to use these tools to help bring you back to focus. And this is some ways that we can use that yin side of the breath. Then there's the yang side of the breath, which is an example of that would be, think about if you ever had to push your car or you pick up something heavy. Your natural instinct is use the exhale side of the breath, put tension in the breath, make it audible. This helps generate energy and power. And you'll notice that a lot of fighters or a lot of athletes will use this kind of chanting and breath work to help build
Yeah.
energy before an event, right? And so when you start learning how to use the breath as a strategy, now we can find more balance throughout the day. We all go through the day with emotional ups and downs, but when you see yourself starting to rise, you can use the breath to bring it back down. And when you see yourself starting to feel a little depleted, you can use the breath to bring you back up and find a lot more balance throughout the day. Then we have what we call uh, regulating the mind. And
Mm.
regulating the mind is a lifelong practice as well, and it's a very deep practice. And the idea of regulating the mind is, as I mentioned, you notice that imbalance is learning how to bring it back to center. So with meditation, a lot of times people think that, through the years, I've heard a lot of people say, I can't meditate because I can't quiet my mind.
Yeah.
Meditation isn't about being in this blissful state of nirvana. It's using these techniques to learn how to come back to center and have that awareness reside from that place of peace. And so when you
Yeah.
meditate, say for 20 minutes or an hour or whatever that is for you, and you get distracted 100 times during that session, Every time you get distracted, you use your posture, you use your breath, you use your alignment, use the movement if it's a movement practice to bring you back to center. And now you're starting to build that muscle. Every time you go off center, you're coming back. And through these repetitions, we start to get really good at being distracted and being emotionally out of balance and coming back to focus because we've done this so much every day in our ritual practices and our active practices. Now, sometimes when you're walking down the street and somebody says something to throw you off your center, or you're at work and you're very stressed out, it's a lot easier, one, to recognize the imbalance, and two, have these tools in your tool belt to help you maintain that focus and come back to center. There's this story that I love of these two old monks, and they're walking down the road, and it's just after a rainstorm, and it's very muddy everywhere, and they come up to this huge mud puddle, and on the other side of the puddle is this beautiful lady standing there in a white dress, and she's crying. And the older monk yells across the puddle and he says, "Ma'am, is everything okay? Can I help you?" And she says, "I need to be somewhere, but if I walk across this puddle, I'm going to get my dress all dirty." So he rolls
Mm.
up his pant legs and he walks across the puddle. He picks her up, puts her on his back, carries her to the other side, sets her down, and she's off on her way. Well, him and the younger monk are walking down the road, and they get a couple miles down the road. And finally, the younger monk is just furious. And he says, we're not supposed to touch ladies, but yet you did back there at the puddle." And he looks down at the
Mm.
younger monk and he says, "You're still thinking about that lady? I left her back there at the puddle." And so many times in our life, we
Yeah.
get caught up on these distractions and we go 2 miles down the road before we can finally even recognize it, let alone let it go. And the meditative arts helps us see these things as soon as they change. It's a lot easier to pick up a pebble off the floor than after it starts rolling down the hill and creates an avalanche. We want to recognize these things from the beginning, and it's a lot easier to make these adjustments.
What
Then,
about what about stuff that like what about like the necessities in life? Let's just say like hypothetically speaking, let's say you're broke or maybe you do have money and or you run a business and or you're worrying about rent, uh stuff like this, like you where things that build up anxiety and they're like on top of your mind and you're just always thinking about them. What about stuff like that?
so life is always going to have problems, and there's nothing that we can do to change anything that comes our way. However, we can change how we deal with that and how we process that. If you think, next week I have rent and I don't know how I'm going to pay that,
Yeah.
and you spend 40 hours over the next week stressing about figuring out how you're going to pay your rent, when you could just acknowledge, hey, I need to make some money. What else can I do? And start thinking on a positive track. How can I solve this problem? Now
Mm,
we're not going down that rabbit hole of those negative thoughts that leads to this negative thing and this negative thing. I can't pay my rent. Oh, then I'm not going to be able to buy gas. And then I can't do this. And now it just leads to a slew of other negative problems, right? That's not doing anybody any good. You got to recognize the problem and acknowledge that, and then start thinking about, okay, what can I do with this time right now to move towards a positive direction? And the meditative arts helps us see those things so we don't get stuck down that negative path and spend the next 40 hours stressing over something,
mm.
but rather recognize those imbalances and stay on that focused path. So, and we've covered regulating the body, regulating the breath, and regulating the mind. The fourth regulation is regulating the energy. And regulating the energy is a very deep topic. It's something that, we could talk about for hours. But the idea of regulating the energy is there's different energies in the body, and there's different circulations that we do with some of these meditations. And if you've got to the point where you're competent in regulating the body, breath, and the mind, regulating the energy is very easy. And then the fifth regulation is regulating the spirit. And regulating the spirit is very profound. Monks, for that live the lifestyle and that's all they do is meditate, will spend their whole life working towards this stage of enlightenment. I've been studying
Mm,
the meditative arts for a long time. I've traveled around the world many times training with some very amazing teachers from all over the planet, and I've never once met anybody who I would say was enlightened. I
really?
don't I don't know if in today's society that's even possible to live an enlightened life. And if there is somebody out
Mm.
there that is doing that, they're up in the mountains somewhere and nobody even knows who they are. And so this
Wait,
is,
wait. I want to know what you like. Do you practice any sort of faith or religion or something
I'm
like
a
that?
very, I'm a very spiritual person. I don't follow any one religion, no.
See,
So
I tell my brother that all the time, and he's like, because uh he recently like reconnected with Christianity, but I'm more so like kind of like you. Like I'm a very spiritual person. I've studied theology, all kinds of religions, and I don't think any one religion is any greater than another. Like, oh, I'm better than you. That's how like religious wars start, like in the past. But I am more connected with spirituality, and whenever I tell my brother that, he's like, "Oh, well, you know, there's also like uh, evil spirituality, like I guess Satanism and demons and stuff in Christianity. That's like the evil side of spirituality." But I don't know.
well, it's all what you focus on, right?
Yeah. But yeah, I believe more so in like I don't think any one religion is greater, and uh but I do believe if you have a like positive morals and whatever religion you practice is I guess for the betterment of humanity and you're not hurting anybody and it makes you a better person, like so be it. Yeah, that was it. I just wanted to know if you were
So back to kind of a different path. You talked a little bit about the philosophy. One of the philosophical concepts that I really enjoy is the idea of yielding. And it's what inspired me to write my last book. The idea of yielding can be used in so many different areas in life. And so I like to bring this idea out as much as possible. And within yielding, there's three different areas of yielding. There's physical yielding, mental yielding, and emotional yielding. Physical yielding is the idea that I push you, you push me, whoever's the bigger, stronger person with the most leverage eventually is going to push the other person over. But with yielding, instead of us seeing who the bigger meathead is, when you push me, I get out of the way of that force, and now I can respond with less effort. So I'm not trying to butt heads with you and see if I'm bigger and stronger than you. Now, this is obvious how this is helpful in the combative arts or even athletics. There's so many professional athletes these days that are practicing the meditative arts to help develop these skill sets to help them be able to perform better. In order to be good at physical yielding, a lot of things have to come into play. You need to be well rooted. The lower part of your body needs to be strong and flexible so you can change your central equilibrium without getting tight. The body has to be relaxed, the breath has to be calm, and the mind has to be present. Now, it takes years and years to get to a high level of this, but when we do, this is where it becomes pretty interesting because not only do we start to see these things more clearly inside of ourselves, but we also start to see them more clearly when we look at other people. And this is where we move into what I call mental yielding. Now, say, for example, I say something that unsettles you, and I pick up on it right from the beginning. If I notice maybe you shift your weight or you put a little tension in your shoulders or change your facial expression, and I can notice this from the beginning, it's a lot easier to adjust the conversation and keep us in
Mm,
a happy place than if I'm not paying attention to that. And pretty soon I'm so far off track, you want to knock me upside the head. And so
mm,
learning how to use yielding in all of your interactions is extremely powerful. One, you're just being more considerate, which is something we could all do more of. And two, it allows you to be strategic in any interaction that you have. And this is extremely benefit in our own personal relationships. It helps us in business, in sales, and negotiations. I mean, there's so many different ways that we can apply this idea. Then we also have what I call emotional yielding. And emotional yielding is very much like mental yielding, but it's with your own interpersonal conflicts. So you think about things, times when something happens to us and we respond and we go down this path. And we might get an hour, a
mm.
day, a week down that road and realize maybe that wasn't the best choice. But with yielding, if we could have taken a step back and analyzed the situation and realized, maybe this is a better path, a lot of times it can save us a lot of heartache on the other side. And I've been explaining this idea of yielding for years here at the academy. And one of the most common things I'll hear people say is that, that makes a lot of sense. I do yielding all the time. And while I would
Mm,
agree, I think everybody has some degree of yielding in their lives all the time. It's kind of like if you or I were to go to a crime scene with a detective who's been on the job for 30 years, he would see things about the series of events and the timeline that I know at least I would have no clue of. And the meditative arts helps us see things inside of ourselves and other people that most people will never have any clue of unless they're doing some kind of a meditative practice.
so it's kind of like when I think of the way you explain yielding, it's kind of like just observing, kind of, and being like more aware.
That's one of the pieces of it, yes. So you do need to be more aware of what's going on in your body and notice how to see those imbalances physically, mentally, and emotionally.
Mm,
But then also strategically, how do we redirect that energy
mm,
to get where we need to go with the least amount of resistance, whether that's physically, mentally, or emotionally. And so yielding is used in strategy, in business, in warfare, in sports, in personal development, in many things that we do. There's so many different directions in how we can apply this concept of yielding to get to a higher level of performance with the least amount of resistance. Any
mm,
athlete can, for example, when Phil Jackson was coaching the Chicago Bulls, he was having those players practice Tai Chi and meditation because it improved their performance. Here you got the best basketball players on the planet with Michael Jordan, and they're doing the meditative arts to help improve their skill set. Well, they
mm.
recognize that while they're maybe already at 94, 95% of their potential, but if they can get to 96 or 97%, how can this help me get to that point that almost makes them seem magical, right? You ever watch Michael Jordan play? The guy's incredible. And so it's the meditative arts when it comes to awareness. It's easy, I think, for people to be in that 80% range of awareness, maybe 85 if they're somewhat intuitive and present. But to get to 90%, 95%, 96%, unless you're doing a meditative practice, I don't think you'll ever see those kinds of numbers.
Well, the first thing I think of is the way you explain that is the Bruce Lee quote, "Be like water." That's the first thing that came to my mind. Um, do you want to achieve enlightenment in your life? Is that something you strive for?
It's not a goal of mine on the forefront. One, because I don't choose to live the lifestyle that I think it would take to attain enlightenment. I feel like if that was my true goal and what I really wanted to do, I would leave my family. I would go up in the mountains. I would be on my own and I would just meditate for the rest of my life. That's not the lifestyle I want to live. However, I think there's so many benefits by integrating the meditative arts to be more in tune with the things that I like to do in society, with being with my family, with running my business, with doing things here,
Mm-hmm.
that it's something that's embedded in me for the rest of my life and I will always turn to. I just am realistic in my expectations in that I think that in order to accomplish that in somebody's lifestyle, they need to live the monk lifestyle. And even with somebody doing that, reaching that enlightened state is very extremely rare.
So do you think that's like a prerequisite to to have to like be in solitude?
Well, I can't answer that because I've never reached that stage myself. But I've also, as I mentioned earlier, I've trained with many teachers around the world that are amazing teachers.
And you don't think any of them have been
I've spent
enlightened?
my whole, yeah, well, I know they haven't. I've spent my whole career training and continuing my education. My wife is a surgeon, and I always joke because I've spent more money on my education learning the meditative arts than she did going through med school, and so I've really invested in my knowledge and my time. I'm always out
Yeah.
learning and studying, even still today after I've been doing it for 36 years.
Mhm.
I feel like I'm more a student now than I was 30 years ago. And I still have yet to meet anybody that I would say is enlightened.
Wow, that's crazy. So what do you think it is? Like what do you think like what do you what would you define as being enlightened, an enlightened person?
If somebody is enlightened, I believe their third eye is open. And in order for your third eye to be open, you have to be 100% honest. And to be 100% honest in today's society, I believe is impossible, which is why I say you need to move to the mountains because it's just very difficult to do when you're associating with other people, and anybody that tells you that they never lie and that they're always honest, and they're lying to you. We all do it. It's to some degree how we do this, right? You might say, your girlfriend might be ready to go out with you and she's wearing something you don't like and she asks you if she looks pretty. Of course you're going to say, yeah, you look beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
But again, that's not being a fully honest,
100%.
right?
Yeah.
And so in order to reach that stage, you have to have that. And if you are enlightened and you have reached that stage, you're open up to where you can read other people and interpret things. And it's believed that you can read other people's minds when you
Really?
reach the stage. And so, one of my old
That's crazy.
meditation teachers, he always jokes with me and he says, if you ever meet somebody that says they're enlightened, ask them to tell you what number you're thinking about between 1 and 100 and see if they know what it is. Because they would be able to read your mind and tell you what it is if they were enlightened.
That's crazy. Well, but what about magicians though? Magicians can
That's all tricks.
do. So you do believe in like the third eye and your pineal gland. you believe in that stuff?
Oh, well, yeah. So, in Qigong theory, the upper dantian is the pituitary and pineal gland. And a lot of the meditations that we do, we focus on that area to help quiet the mind. And, one of the kind of root fundamental sitting practices in Qigong is something called the embryonic breathing. And you have to be
Mm,
very in tune with the lower and upper dantian and learning how to quiet the mind and bringing the energy inward in order to reach a deep stage of meditation in this practice. And it is believed that if you can get to a high level of practice doing the embryonic breathing, that you could do any energetic practice or meditation, because once you can control the mind and find that center, everything else is kind of just falls into place.
mm. I've been listening to a lot of Joe Dispenza. Have you heard of him?
Hmm.
He speaks of this as like he calls it the universal consciousness of like energies, and it's what connects us all. And through I think it's like inward and outward meditations where you bring your awareness to your body and between the space between your body or something like that. It's like it's crazy, but like whenever I listen to his meditations and practice his style of meditations, I I get into those like states like you were talking about where like time kind of doesn't exist, and then you just like wake up and it's like the meditation's over. And it's like where was I for the last like 30 minutes? So I don't know. I For me, I meditate because it definitely grounds me into the present moment. It allows me to process my emotions better. Um, Especially like I love your monk story. Like I use that with emotions like a lot. Like I think emotions are the biggest one for that type of story where you may feel these emotions like let's say like that woman was your emotion and you felt it in the moment where they helped her. You felt that emotion, but then and now it's gone. Now it's there. Now you're back into a different moment, a different present moment. And that's why I practice meditations.
How long have you been meditating?
Man, it's crazy. I started meditating and I was 24, 25. So I'll be 30 in September. And I don't even know why I started meditating. It was just, I just downloaded that Headspace app. You remember Headspace?
Yeah.
Yeah, I had that. It was like kind of new at the time. And it was just like, oh, like reduce stress, more focus, more like all like the benefits. So I was doing that, and yeah, I was feeling better. Like I was starting to feel more aware. I was starting to feel more focused, more clear. And the way they do their guided meditations is like he'll start off with like the breaths, and then he'll give you something to think about, and he'll give you some visuals, and then he just won't talk for like 5 minutes, and then he'll come back and then kind of do the same thing over again. But yeah, that's the first time I ever meditated was that.
Yeah, it's a great practice. Keep it up. I think as you do, remember that there's many different directions that you can take with the meditative arts through movement practices like Tai Chi or Qigong or yoga, sitting
Mm,
practices, breath work, standing meditation, and it's important, I think, to understand the science behind the practice so you can
Mm,
build a life practice around these meditative arts. Because, I break down the categories of meditation into 5 areas. So we have more of our athletic or a combative style or performance enhancing kind of meditations. There's the therapeutic side of the practice, the medical side of the practice, the philosophical side of the practice, then also the meditative or spiritual side of the practice.
mm-hmm,
And you want to have a good understanding of why you're turning to meditation, so that way you
mm,
can incorporate practices that will help you down that path. I've been teaching for over 30 years, and I've had students come through the academy that have been watching this YouTube form of meditation, or this listening to this audio meditation, or following this guided practice. And they've been doing it for 10, 15 years sometimes. And, they're
mm,
doing it every day, and they're really on it. But they come in here and they meet somebody who's had a teacher and had a focus and that's had some direction. And they'll see somebody that's maybe only been practicing for 6 months or a year, who has a deeper understanding of the meditative arts, because they've had a guide. They've had somebody
mm.
help point them down the right direction.
Like
It's
a
kind of like,
mentor, yeah.
it's kind of just like, you think about, if you have never watched a game of basketball and don't know anything about it, and I take you to a basketball court and I hand you a ball and I say, go play basketball.
Mm,
Whereas if you have a coach, think about, say you have somebody like Phil Jackson to help you and tell you how to dribble, and tell you how to run plays, and tell you the strategy behind the game. And think about how much more you're going to cover in a short amount of time. And even like 6 months, how much more you're going to be able to do. And, our lives here on this planet are extremely short, and our time is valuable. If you have somebody that helps you learn how to build an evolving life practice around the meditative arts, you can get so much more out of your time by using that at your disposal. And today, if you go onto YouTube, for example, you'll see a million different videos, and it's almost overwhelming and distracting, because you don't know why they're doing this one or this one or this one. And if you're going at it on your own and just kind of saying, oh, I'll follow that one today and that one tomorrow, you could let 10
mm.
years go by and really not get very far down the path at all. And so having somebody to help you and point things out to you is really invaluable in this practice. And remember, I told you this already, but I've been studying for 36 years, and I'm still just a student. I'm learning all the time, and if somebody who's never done the meditative arts thinks that they can just go and teach themselves,
Mm.
they're really missing out.
So now you're doing this every day. You're working on the yielding. Is it the yielding warrior?
Yeah. So, yeah. And anybody that's interested in this philosophy, if you go to theyieldingwarrior.com/book, I've got a free copy of my book there. You just pay for shipping and handling. And there's also has our online membership there. And you're welcome to check that out. You can try it out for a couple weeks, and it helps you learn how to start incorporating the meditative arts to build a lifestyle around meditation. And then also, if you are somebody who runs a yoga studio or a martial arts studio, or you're a life coach, we have our teacher training program that teaches you how to add a new pillar to your existing business, or to have these to give to your clients if you're teaching, high level business professionals that are looking for more focus and less stress and those kinds of things. It teaches you how to prescribe different meditative practices to get different outcomes. So it's something that you can check out.
Let's go check it out. Go support Jeff. But I like to move into our conclusion now. If you're ready for it.
Sounds good.
So first, I want to ask you a question before that, and the question is, what's something that you'd like to change in the world today?
two things. One is if we could educate people on the value of spending 20 minutes a day meditating, I think the world would be a much better place. And that would lead to more consideration in the world, which would take care of a lot of the violence and the problems that we have on the planet. And so it just kind of goes back to my calling and my mission. I want to get these arts out there to as many people as possible. And I think it would really influence everything around the world.
I agree. I think anyone who practices a purpose driven grounding ritual every day, I think would be a better person if they didn't, opposed to those who don't do any of that. But all right, let's play this game. I pulled out random cards, and the question is, can you please share something from your teenage point of view about people people I'm envious of? So who are you envious of from a teenage perspective?
When I was a teenager, I came from very modest means. We grew up in government housing and used to buy food with food stamps. And, I didn't have many options as a youth. And so I was always thinking about ways that I could get out of that and be more
Mm,
successful. And after being the first kid in all of my extended family to go through college, and I earned
mm,
2 degrees in less than 4 years. And I remember getting out of school and my whole family thinking I'm going to go get some big important job doing something in finance or something like that. And
yeah.
remember this is back in 1994, but I remember telling myself that if I could teach martial arts and just make $30,000 a year and be happy doing what I love, that would be all that I need. And so that I think was the biggest change, was learning how to not think about desiring the dollar, but
Mm,
following my passion. And it came from an old teacher of mine who told me once, he said, "You want to learn how to create a life and not make a living." And that really stuck with me.
mm.
And my whole career has been around creating a life rather than chasing the dollar.
I 100% agree and align with that as well. It's like you could do something that makes you a lot of money, but you'll be sacrificing your peace and your happiness and your livelihood. So to me, it's something like if you could find something that maybe is lucrative and you're also passionate about it, like that's a win-win right there. Um, and if it's important to you enough, you'll make time for it as well. Like if it's something like a side hustle or a job that you have to work for stability, but your side project that just gives you joy in doing it. So I 100% I'll agree and align with that. There's a quote that I it reminded me of, but I forgot. It literally just like came and went. Man, it's a good quote too. That sucks. I completely forgot it. But anyways, uh, my final five questions. The first question is, what is your biggest regret?
I wish I would have got inspired at a younger age to push my potential.
Hmm. And where are you now with that?
I live my life to grow, so every day I'm constantly uh, pushing it and growing in a direction that I feel is positive.
What do you think your potential is?
Right now the most important thing to me is being a good dad, being there for my kids, uh, which is something that I never had. And so I just want to support them and give them as much love as I can, and also set the best example for them, which is why one of the things that motivates me in business and success is that I want them to see that, hey, if you guys get out there and get passionate about something and follow your heart and what you really believe in, you can live a very fruitful, enjoyable life rather than getting caught up in the rat race.
Hmm. Yeah, man. The rat race. It's designed like that, you know. They the government designed um starting from the education system, you know, like you're taught a certain way to prepare you to work a job that you might get in debt with in the meantime, and then the debt keeps you in this cycle of just like paying your bills. And oh, that was the quote, earning a living. You don't earn a living, you just live. That was it.
Okay.
It's funny how I like brought back to that. Yeah, you don't earn a living, you just live. You don't have to earn a living when you're already alive. If you woke up today, you're alive. You don't have to earn the life that you woke up today. That was the quote. Um, but yeah. Anyways, next question is, who or what has made the biggest impact in your life?
By far the meditative arts, it's changed my life in endless ways, and I've had numerous very influential teachers along the way, and so they've played a huge role in that as well.
If there is one thing that you could recommend uh, in regarding the meditative arts, what would be the first thing you'd recommend?
Start today and get going on a daily ritual, and find yourself a guide to kind of help you think about what your whys are, what's going to motivate you to do the practice. Why is it important to you? Do you want to stick around longer to watch your grandkids grow up? Do you want to improve your performance? Do you want to get rid of stress and anxiety in your life? Whatever it is, and really spend some time kind of digging deep on what those whys are, because we all have this come up where tomorrow morning that alarm's going to go off and you're going to be, I'll just hit the snooze button, I'll meditate tomorrow. Tomorrow's never going to come, and you got to make it part of your day. You got to make it part of your life. And if you
Yeah.
do that and you integrate this practice now, I guarantee you, if I mentioned how many students we've had come through here. Is really, we've been around for a while, and of the students that listen to that advice and they do their 20 minutes a day and they integrate these active practices and they do this every day for a year, very high percentage, above 95% of those people will do the meditative arts for the rest of their life, because they'll see so many benefits from the practice that it's crazy to stop. The ones that
Mm,
quit are the ones that don't do it every day. They do it like a hobby. They'll do a little bit here and there, and they just never really see the benefits because they've never had the discipline to make that consistency. And the way that we get the discipline is by having a strong why. So
mm,
think about your why and just get in there, find yourself somebody that helps keep you on path, and do it a little bit every day.
Yeah, I agree, man. It's something that's part of my daily thing as well. And my why isn't even like that crazy. It's just to be more present and to be more grounded every day, to like um not let life like get in the way of my self, I guess. I don't know if that makes any sense, but yeah, to like not get in my own way. I think that's one of my biggest reasons why I meditate.
Nice.
My next question is, what is one lesson that you had to learn the hard way?
I think that would probably be referred to through the business here, in that through the first 5, 6 years I was running this academy, I thought that I could just make it happen. I thought that I had my passion, I had my practice and the depth and understanding of the arts. I thought, just make it happen. I didn't go out and get a mentor with the business. I didn't have somebody direct me on how to set up systems and how to teach employees and how to run things effectively with advertising and offers and everything that comes with running a business. And those first years, that's when most people fail. I don't know what the statistic is, but I've heard anywhere from 80 to 90% of most businesses fail within the first 5 years.
Yeah.
And so I think that by the time I finally did break down and look for a mentor, my whole world changed when it came to the success of the business. So that was some hard lessons those years, just trying to figure out how to keep the doors open. Wish that was something that somebody would have told me from a earlier stage. Go out there and get a mentor, somebody that can help guide you and help you be more successful with the business.
How did you end up finding a mentor?
I heard about somebody in Colorado through the grapevine, through other people, and I went out to do a weekend seminar with him. Back in like '96 or '97, long time ago, and
Yeah.
ever since that happened, that point, that was kind of like the starting point of my business starting to take off.
Hmm. What do you tell people like that come to you and say like I just can't meditate, like I can't sit still? What do you tell those people?
Through the years, that's the most common thing I've heard.
Yeah.
And the first thing is that everybody can meditate. The
Hmm.
most important thing is, why do you want to do it? And find a practice that is fun for you. So, for example, if you're somebody who does have difficulty sitting in one place for 20 minutes, maybe begin your practice with a movement meditation like a Qigong set or a Tai Chi form, something where you can start getting into that present mind space and start learning some of the foundational principles of the meditative arts. And then later, maybe we move into a sitting practice or a standing meditation. But don't get caught up with any like expectations or goals or things that
Hmm.
have to happen.
Yeah.
I mentioned earlier that some people think that if you can't quiet the mind, you can't meditate. That's so couldn't be further from the truth. So find something
Yeah.
that's fun for you. Find a good guide that will help keep you focused on a direct path, and you'll get the most out of your practice if you do that.
My next question is, what would you do if you had all the time and all the money in the world?
Not a whole lot different than I'm doing now. I just continue to spend as much time as I can with my family and my kids, uh, to keep creating new things, working on my next book, making my online program better for people to have a better platform to learn and grow within the meditative arts, and continue to be here at the community here at my academy. I think, even if I had billions of dollars in the bank, I'm still going to teach. I love be able to hand down the arts.
I love it, man. I support that. Is there anything you'd like to share with whoever's listening that you'd like to leave them with?
I think we've touched on pretty much everything that I think's important. Is just find your why, find a good guide, and start the practice today. I guarantee you, if you do that and you stick with it, it'll be one of the best decisions you've ever made.
Jeff Patterson, everybody. Go support him. Thank you, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it.